proceed, Your Honor. Could you tell us your name?
Yes, my name is Dr. Ashley Norton.
Dr. Norton, what are you doing in court today?
I was hired by Miss Dawson to perform an analysis of the breath alcohol concentration test that was used on her the night that she had her accident.
Before we talk about that analysis, I want to give the jury a chance to get to know you and how you're able to talk about that analysis.
All right.
Could you tell us where you went to school?
Yes, I got my Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Brown University, and I also got my Master's and PhD in Forensic Science from Johns Hopkins University.
So after attaining your Bachelor's in Science, Master's, and PhD in Forensic Science, what did you do from there?
Well, actually, now I teach. I teach a science class at Midland State University, and I also work from time to time as a consultant.
What do you specialize in, Doctor?
Breath alcohol concentration tests. I'm what you might call a breath alcohol specialist.
So when you're analyzing these breath alcohol tests, what type of information do you need to assess the reliability of those tests?
Actually, the only thing that I need to know is the test that was used.
Do you know the test that was used on Danielle?
Most certainly. It was the Intoxilizer 8000.
All right, so once you know what test is being used, what do you do from there?
Well, I look at what steps go into completing the test, and I look at the possible problems that may have occurred in completing that test, and then I determine whether or not they may have actually occurred in a particular instance.
So is that what you did in regards to the Intoxilizer 8000 when you were looking at what was given to Danielle?
Yes, sir, it is.
And did you reach your conclusions today to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, I did.
So let's talk about some of the problems that you found with the analysis. What are those?
Well, I found that there were essentially two problems. There was a problem with residual mouth alcohol, as well as a ratio that is assumed by the Intoxilizer 8000.
Let's split those up and talk about them one at a time, Doctor. First, you told us about a breath-to-blood ratio. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Well, the Intoxilizer 8000 actually doesn't measure your blood. It measures the amount of alcohol in your breath. It then uses a predetermined ratio to take the amount of alcohol in your breath and convert it to the amount of alcohol in your blood.
Earlier, I know you weren't in court, but we heard from the doctor who actually administered the test to Danielle, and she told us that this ratio is somewhat constant. Is that accurate?
No, it most certainly is not. I have performed many tests myself, as well as other scientists around the world, that has proven that not only do the ratios differ among human beings, but they differ among ourselves. A person could have a lower ratio at one point during the day, and a higher ratio at a later point during the day.
I want to be sure I understand what exactly this differing ratio really means. I know when you were explaining it to me earlier, you showed me an example that you sometimes give to your students in class.
Yes.
Do you think that demonstration might help the jury in understanding what this ratio is?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, Your Honor, may the witness step down to make use of a demonstrative. Sure. Let's step on down, Dr. Norton. Sorry. You.
Come on, here, Miss Arnold.
I'm handing you 2 balloons, and I'm taking one for myself.
That's right. Miss Arnold, you can have the other balloon.
Anyone from the state needs to reposition, you may reposition yourself so you can watch the demonstration.
Just go ahead and stand right here.
So what are we doing with these balloons, Doctor?
Well, we're going to blow up these balloons. And the reason this is important is because you're obviously a bigger human being than I am. Well, you're obviously a smaller human being than I am. And while I'm not average, we're going to assume that I'm about the average size of a human being, even though I'm a little bit short, but that's okay. What we're going to do right now is we're going to blow a full breath of air into these balloons. Okay?
So you want us to blow as much air as we can in with one single breath?
That's correct. Just take a deep breath and blow as much air as you can into that balloon.
Okay.
All right. Can you go ahead and tie it?
Sure.
Very good. Now, you'll notice that your balloon is bigger than my balloon, and your balloon is smaller than my balloon. These balloons correlate to the ratios, and this is the problem. Different human beings have different ratios.
So how exactly is this the problem in regards to the Intoxilizer test that was given to Danielle?
Well, the Intoxilizer 8000 assumes that this is the ratio among all people. However, that is just simply not true. Sometimes people have larger ratios, and sometimes people have smaller ratios. And that will actually affect the results of the Intoxilyzer 8000.
What exactly is that effect? I'm not quite understanding.
Well, for example, if you have a smaller ratio, the Intoxilyzer 8000 will make your blood alcohol concentration level bigger to match the average. If you have a higher ratio, it will then make your blood alcohol concentration level smaller to match the average, and that's the problem.
So I want to be sure I understand you, doctor. What does this mean in regards to the number, the decimal that the machine reads whenever you're given this test?
Yes, well, if Miss Dawson did in fact have a smaller ratio, then her results would be incorrect. They would actually be larger than what her actual blood alcohol concentration was. If she had a higher ratio, then that blood alcohol concentration level would be smaller.
Thank you, doctor. I'll take that balloon from you. Thank you, Sarah. So, doctor, we talked a lot about that breath-to-blood ratio issue you found. What was the second problem you found with the test?
There was a problem with the residual mouth alcohol.
This residual mouth alcohol, what exactly is that?
Well, think of residual mouth alcohol as bad breath. When you eat an onion, your breath is still going to smell like onions. When you drink alcohol, there's still going to be alcohol present in your mouth.
What are some of the things that can cause this mouth alcohol?
There's a lot of things. Just drinking, just having a drink and then testing your blood alcohol concentration, well, that can cause mouth alcohol. Mints, dental work, mouthwash, indigestion, burping. There's a multitude of things that can cause mouth alcohol.
Once again, doctor, I know you weren't in here, but when Dr. Smith was talking about the mouth alcohol, she told us that this indigestion problem won't affect the mouth alcohol. Is that accurate?
No. No. Burping will affect mouth alcohol, and just like burping will affect mouth alcohol, so will indigestion. Things like heartburn, when your gastro gases are coming up through your esophagus and into your mouth, that will cause mouth alcohol.
So these problems that you found, were any of those symptoms possibly present in Danny's case when she was given that test?
Yes, actually, I believe there was. Miss Dawson told me that she was suffering from heartburn that night, which is a sign of indigestion.
So, combined with that issue that you found with the breath-to-blood ratio, in addition to this mouth alcohol, what can you tell us about the test that was given to Danny that night?
I can tell you that the results, that her blood alcohol concentration level was 0.19, is without question wrong.
Thank you, Dr. Norton. No further questions, Your Honor.
Dr. Norton.
Hello.
Right now in direct, you just had the council demonstrate with balloons the ratio, correct?
Yes, we use the balloons.
Did you measure Danny's ratio?
Excuse me?
Were you able to calculate Danny's ratio that night?
Actually, no, I wasn't able to, and that's
Thank you.
because...
Now, Dr. Norton, you've also...
Objection, Your Honor. Badgering the witness, I asked that she give him a chance to really tell us why he wasn't able to assess the true ratio.
Your Honor, it was a yes or no question.
Overruled.
Now, Professor Norton, you're getting paid $250 an hour to work on this case, correct?
Yes, up until this point, I've been paid about $7,000.
And about how many cases have you testified in court?
A lot. I've actually testified in court quite a bit.
And would you say that number was over 100?
Yeah, it might be.
And in all these 100 cases, have you ever testified for the prosecution?
Well, no, ma'am, of course not. The police are the one who take care of these things. They have their own experts that work for the police department. I work for a university.
So in every single case, you have always testified for the defense?
Of course, I think it would be silly for the government to hire me for what they have their own experts to do.
And you're getting, excuse me, you already stated you're getting paid $250 an hour to work on the case?
Yes, ma'am.
And you worked 20 hours on this case?
Yes.
So that brings your total to $5,000 in addition to the $2,000 for testifying today?
Yes, I know that most experts charge more, but I'm really in it for the science.
And in all these 20 hours, did you ever go to the scene of the crime?
Excuse me, the scene of the crime?
Yes.
No, there was no reason to. The scene of the crime had absolutely nothing to do with her blood alcohol concentration.
You not
level.
once went to the crash site, though, to gain further knowledge on the incident?
There's no knowledge to gain from the crash site.
Could you just answer yes or no?
I didn't go to the crash site.
And in all these 20 hours of working, did you use any other testimony besides the defendant, Danny Dawson?
No, I was only analyzing her blood alcohol concentration level.
But did you use any relevant testimony, say, from Officer Foster, who was there that night?
I reviewed the police reports.
Did you review testimony from eyewitness London Bennett or Taylor Hobson?
No.
All right, Professor Norton, let's talk about, so for the 20 hours that you spent working on this case, you only used one out-of-court statement, and that was for the defense, correct?
I'm sorry, an out-of-court statement?
Yes. You interviewed Danny Dawson?
Yes, I interviewed Miss Dawson about the events that occurred on the night that she had her accident.
Okay. And now let's talk about how you interviewed Danny Dawson. Danny told you that she had been drinking 1 drink per hour over a period of several hours.
Yes, ma'am.
And she told you that she had consumed evenly, it was just 1 drink per hour, for clarification?
And she told me that she had on average 1 drink an hour.
Now, Professor Norton, you have experience with alcohol and the effects of it on an individual, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And alcohol is an intoxicant?
It's a depressant.
Okay, and alcohol impairs judgment, correct?
It can, yes.
And it also impairs memory recall, correct?
In certain instances and in certain quantities, alcohol can cause memory lapses, but that usually requires a large amount of alcohol in a short amount of time to affect memory.
How many hours was Danny Dawson drinking that night?
I believe that she said close to 9 hours, close to 9 or 10 hours.
Is 9 hours a substantial amount of time to impair memory recall?
No, ma'am. To impair memory recall would actually occur within about the course of an hour, and we're talking about upwards of 10 shots of alcohol to impair memory.
Okay, so was Danny Dawson's judgment or memory recall at all impaired because of the alcohol she consumed in 9 hours?
I don't believe so, no.
So you don't think 9 hours of drinking has any bearing on an individual?
It's important not to just look about how long you were drinking, but also how much. Had she drank for 9 hours and had over 90 shots, then probably her memory would be affected. But because she only had about 1 drink an hour, she wouldn't have been affected.
Right, but she drank for let's say 1 drink an hour for 9 hours. So would you say her judgment was equivalent to that of someone who hadn't had any drinks?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Was Danny Dawson that night in the same mental state as someone who was completely sober?
It's entirely possible, actually. When you drink alcohol, sometimes you can't feel the effects of that alcohol. I know that I've actually, in my office, performed tests on students, had them drink alcohol, and then have them use a breathalyzer to determine their blood alcohol concentration level. And I've noticed that even when they register .08, they aren't always acting drunk.
All right, so she couldn't have been feeling it possibly, but is the alcohol still in her system?
If you drink alcohol, it will be in your system, yes.
The alcohol is still in her system. Is that a yes?
I would probably suspect that alcohol was in her system that night, yes.
So it's possible that Danny Dawson could be wrong about the number of drinks she consumed because she wasn't quite sure how many she drank that night.
I mean, I have no reason to believe that she was wrong.
But it's possible because alcohol was in her system whether she felt it or not.
I mean, I guess, but she told me how much she had, and she seemed pretty sure of it.
But she could be wrong because alcohol was in fact in her system, right, Professor Norton?
I don't believe her memory was affected at all. So if you're asking if she was wrong because her memory was affected, then no.
Was alcohol in her system, Professor Norton?
Yes, she
so
had
this
alcohol.
could have impaired her memory recall.
No.
At all. The alcohol could have no bearing on
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, this is unnecessarily cumulative. We've heard on the record that while alcohol consumption over an extended period of time can cause memory impairment, it didn't necessarily in this case cause memory impairment, but the number of drinks Danielle remembers having. This is now the 4th time opposing counsel has asked this very same question. It's unnecessarily cumulative.
Overruled, Your Honor.
Okay. Professor Norton, after Danny Dawson told you this, she said, like I said before, that she drank 1 drink per hour over a period of 9 hours, correct?
Yeah, she told me that on average she had 1 drink an hour for about 9 or 10 hours.
Did she mention documenting her time every time she took a drink?
I'm sorry, documenting?
Did she check the clock or a watch, perhaps?
I assume she did. She seemed pretty sure that she had 1 drink an hour.
But did she tell you, I checked the clock every time I consumed a drink? Yes or no?
She didn't tell me that she checked the clock.
So as far as you know, there's no way she was able to document her drinking over a period of several hours.
No, I disagree.
Objection, Your Honor. Unnecessarily cumulative.
If you're objecting really to the argument of nature, I'm going to sustain that.
As to opposing counsel's argumentative questioning?
So I will sustain on that, on those grounds.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Professor Norton. Now, one last thing. In direct, you mentioned that mouth alcohol can affect the readings of an individual's breath alcohol concentration, correct?
Yes, it most certainly can.
Did Danny tell you that she had any breath mints that night?
No, Miss Dawson was in the back of a squad car, and I don't think the police hand out breath mints.
What about Listerine or mouthwash?
Again, I don't think the police are handing you mouthwash.
Did Danny mention throwing up that night?
She did not. The only thing that she indicated to me that does cause mouth alcohol is the heartburn, her indigestion.
One last thing. After all your conclusive findings, Professor Norton, you agree, though, that Danny Dawson was too drunk to drive
Objection,
that
Your Honor.
night?
This is an improper opinion under Rule 702.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. I had to hear the entirety of the question before I can.
I had asked Professor Norton if he did in fact agree that Danny Dawson was too drunk to drive that night.
Overruled.
So I'll ask again, Professor Norton, you agree, even after all your conclusive findings, that Danny Dawson on the night of the crash was too drunk to drive?
It would seem that way.
Is
However,
that a yes?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Overruled.
it would seem that way. However, if the drinks that she had didn't contain the average amount of alcohol, then it's entirely possible that her blood alcohol concentration level could have been low enough.
Excuse me, Professor Norton, I'm asking you a yes or no question. Was Danny Dawson, in your honest opinion, too drunk to drive?
It would seem that way, but we don't have all the facts. If indeed her blood alcohol concentration level was above 0.08, then yes, legally she would have been intoxicated.
I have no further questions.
Brief redirect, Your Honor. Dr. Norton, a moment ago, opposing counsel didn't give you a chance to answer the question when she asked you about this breath-to-blood ratio. Can you tell us why you're not able to determine the true ratio of Danielle?
Well, I wasn't there that night. I wasn't hired until sometime after this incident occurred. It would have been proper for, I believe her name was or excuse me, I believe the officer's name was Mrs. Smith, and it would have been proper for her to determine the ratio on the night of the accident.
And the fact that you aren't able to determine the true ratio, does that affect your conclusion that the results of that test may have been wrong?
No, it does not.
No further questions, Your Honor.